Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, science writer, skeptical investigator, and founder of Debunking.org, Mick West, steps into the vault. Mick spends his time analyzing and critiquing claims of the paranormal, and he scrutinizes details behind popular conspiracy theories. Prepare to challenge what you may believe. Mick holds nothing back.
And that might sound like I'm talking down to people, but most people who believe in conspiracy theories nowadays started out by watching some YouTube video. They're not motivated to find alternative explanations. They see it as they've got a scoop. So just because someone doesn't know immediately what something is doesn't mean that it's unusual. We don't really have any evidence of aliens in the galaxy. And I think, if there were lots of them, you would see some kind of evidence.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey. My quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenewald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know that there are tons of options out there, so thank you for that. It's going to be a very controversial show. I'm going to say that. And I know that because, if you missed the announcement, most of the interviews now are going to be live streamed on the Black Vault YouTube channel. Now, I did this interview with Mick West earlier this week. Now, I've talked to Mick before. In fact, for those who really pay attention to the Twitter feed, he and I had a back and forth disagreement, but respectful, about maybe 2 months ago. That was about the DD Form 1910. I think that some people just don't like opposing views. The show got, a lot of great comments and feedback, and people in the chat were great. But, of course, there are those that, they just don't like people that debunk things. Now, here's what I like about Mick, and what I think you will gauge from the interview if you keep an open mind, because you may not agree with everything that he says, but at least look at how thorough he is. Look at some of the videos as well. So you'll see it in the interview, or hear it in the interview, but you'll see it on his videos. And he really sets up these big, elaborate kind of experiments to either prove or disprove whatever the particular claim is. Now, most recently, he got quite a bit of attention for setting up and reproducing the gimbal video and showing the movement and the auras around the objects, that it's not what we think it is, and so on. So he tackled those 3 A-tip videos, and honestly, he did a good job. So he himself will tell you it's not an exact match, but it's close. And it's close enough to continue to pursue that theory that this is potentially just a jet. And again, you may not agree with that because you think, the military pilot's testimony completely negates all that. Well, that's fine. But what Mick does is deals with the evidence that you can show him or hand to him, and he does the rest. Testimony, it's not as valuable to some as it is to others, and that's okay. I've said it many times before. The smoking gun for anything, not only just UFOs, but anything, is different for all of us. So we have to be okay to hear opposing views, even though at the end of the day we just don't agree with it. It's really good for all of us to hear it, simply because maybe we can learn something. Maybe we can see how ridiculous skeptics are being trying to explain something. Maybe we can see that those skeptics actually have a point. So we learn from it. We're stronger from it. And to be honest with you, for me, as someone who's not going to agree all the time with Mick, but I can be strong enough in my own beliefs to respect what he does. But the one thing that I would want to say is that Mick sets the bar higher, right? He creates these videos and these experiments and these explanations, which again are not always something that I agree with. But it sets the bar for us to really try hard to prove what we are trying to say. As an advocate and believer that there is a UFO cover-up and that there is something to this topic and that this is something that we should look into. And then I go and have a conversation with someone like Mick West, who hasn't seen any evidence that he thinks is worthwhile. It makes me realize that we do have to work hard at trying to prove our side, because there is a burden of proof when we have a belief in that. And Mick sets the bar on what we really need to aim to achieve. That's not a bad thing. And my conversation with Mick, I think, will really show you again how interesting the guy is. He's incredibly intelligent, and again, goes to great lengths to either prove or disprove things. So we get into quite a few different topics, UFOs included, and like I said, don't be afraid to hear the opposing view. At the end of the show, you may not agree with him, but that's okay. If he makes a point to you where you change your mind, that's okay too. If you're strong in your beliefs, you'll enjoy this show. Lots of other exciting announcements before I get to the Mick West interview. On the note of live streaming these interviews, the audiences are growing. At least that's what I can see on the YouTube analytics. It's a new feature. It's only like literally 2 weeks old on this channel. And it's really cool to see. I mean, I will say one thing about the Mick West interview. The audio is not going to be what I like. I'm a little bit of a OCD perfectionist. I want everything perfect. I want it ideal. And sadly, the Mick West interview is not when it comes to the audio. I'm still trying to figure out why. I think it was a YouTube glitch. In fact, there's 2 parts where it sounds a little bit robotic, and there's an echo that comes in. I was thinking about editing that out, but it's still, you can still understand it. It's bad if it was the entire interview, but it only lasts for about 90 seconds. Nothing happened with Mick and I. In fact, the mixer board that I have was sending out fine audio. The reason I say that is because that's how I monitor it. So I monitor what goes out of the mixer and to YouTube. It was solid. I didn't know that there was an issue. It was just the chat room people that told me. So what I'm going to do in the future now, I just need to buy a few more things, sadly. It gets a little expensive, but buy a few more things so I can do an extra output locally. Not to be tech geeky, but what I mean by that is instead of relying on the audio that YouTube then captures, because they screwed it up, I believe, on their side. So instead of relying on that, I will have a second output. So if something like this happens again and it is YouTube, I will have a clean copy. Sounds kind of easy to do, but to be honest with you, it's not. I've already got 3 sound cards for you watching live. You'll see the mixer behind me, all sorts of cables coming out. There's 3 sound cards to handle the output to YouTube, my guest. So I have that on a dedicated sound card. And then when I open up the phone lines, I had to put that on a dedicated sound card as well. So it's a fairly complicated setup. So to add a 4th channel here where we output to another one is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to be doing that for you. But that being said, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can get updated and join in on one of the live conversations, because it's a lot of fun. I'll pull chat room questions and comments, and I noticed a lot of people banter back and forth as well during the show. So it just kind of gives you an extra added element, and it's something that's a lot of fun. So to subscribe to that, as I get tongue-tied, to subscribe to that, go to www.theblackvault.com/live. That will bounce you to the YouTube channel. You'll see that there are a growing number of videos. It's very humble in the amount of videos that you can watch now, again, simply because this is brand new. But hit that subscribe button. Helps me out as well. And then check out what I've got. There's a few interviews, and then what I do is I clip those interviews and create segments out of it. So you'll hear Mick West talk about Bob Lazar. I've got a video on there where it's just his explanation about a discovery that was made about the Bob Lazar hand scanner. It's a cool little story. So I make videos out of that, just kind of test it out, and seems to be real popular. In fact, the numbers are starting to grow even bigger than the shows themselves. So very, very cool. So all of that is available on the YouTube channel. Thank you for subscribing. And if you did not see, I started a Patreon page as well. Not mandatory, something that I do appreciate if you decided to support the site. It could be as low as $1 a month, get you extra content videos, a monthly chat where I bring in all the supporters. So it's a lot more intimate, between the supporters and myself, that we can just have a chat, and it's only open to those supporters. I'll still do public ones like I've done in the last couple of weeks. They just definitely won't be as frequent, only because it's just going to come down to how much free time there is. But we'll definitely be doing at least once a month for the supporters. And again, it's just a way to get updated on some stuff that's going on with me that I don't publish, because there is a ton that goes on that I don't publish because I have to wait. But I thought it might be fun to just give the supporters kind of updates as things go on. Most recently, I'll be dropping a video for the supporters all about emails that I got on the UFO reporting guidelines. And they're actually really interesting. I haven't posted them yet simply because it spawned a couple of other FOIA requests. So I want the complete picture when I kind of drop this and maybe write a bit bigger article about it. But I'm kind of updating the supporters on what those documents say, what the internal emails were about those UFO reporting guidelines. They've never been released before. I will be dropping them pretty soon publicly, but for now, supporters are kind of getting the inside look, and that's what that's all about. But again, not mandatory, but if you are interested, www.patreon.com/theblackvault. No spaces, all one word. Patreon.com/theblackvault. There's different levels, different perks, different all sorts of fun stuff. And thank you to all of those who have already signed up. It really is something that I appreciate. I can't even explain it into words. All of you, I have sent you a message directly, but here I am publicly thanking you. It is something that I do appreciate. And if you are one of those supporters, the books are going out today, the day that this radio show drops, which is August 2nd. All the other perks are being scheduled. So definitely check your inbox if you have not already. And if you're, again, still deciding whether or not you want to support the site, check out the different levels, see what you can get, and see if it's worthwhile to you. If not, don't worry. The show will remain free. The Black Vault will remain free, and you can still access everything. So I appreciate that consideration. Thank you for all of that. Stay tuned for my interview with Mick West. It's coming up. Stay tuned. All right, Mick. So I think we're live.
All right.
I really do appreciate your time today. So welcome to the Black Vault Live. This is Mick West. Hello to everybody in the YouTube chat room that is starting to fill up. I know we're just getting going here. But Mick, I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
I'm very glad to be here.
With that said, I want to start a little bit with your background. Now, I titled the show The Debunker, and I want to get into the D word just simply because I've talked about it on this show before, where I've always felt that was insulting. But you call yourself a debunker. I always preferred skeptic or skeptical and so on. And it's silly for me to think that. I just always have. But before I ask you about the D word, tell me a little bit about your background on how you kind of came to be known as the guy that challenges these conspiracy theories and essentially either debunks them or, who knows, maybe confirms a few.
Yeah, well, my background is I'm a retired video game programmer, which you might think is not, the ideal background for a debunker.
Hmm.
But I did fairly well in the video game industry. I worked on the Tony Hawk series of games, and that allowed me to kind of be a semi-retire early. And when I was in retirement, getting into retirement, I'm retired now from the industry. I just kind of did things I found interesting. And something I've always really found interesting is looking into strange claims, like unusual claims, claims that are outside the mainstream, and trying to figure them out. I was very interested in UFOs as a child and as a teenager, and still am now to a degree, but in a different way. And I read a lot about UFOs, and I found them fascinating. And I read a lot of science fiction when I was young. So these are always topics that interested me. And then after I retired, I had all this spare time, and I was learning to fly, working on my pilot's license, and learning about aviation and the weather at high altitudes. And I also read about the chemtrails conspiracy theory, which is one of the first things that I put a lot of effort into debunking. So I read about these chemtrails, and I thought I'd just start a blog about them.
Hmm.
And that started the Contrail Science blog, which is all about what contrails are and what chemtrails are not, essentially. People look up in the sky and they see these white lines behind planes, and they think they are these things called chemtrails, which would be a deliberate spraying of chemicals, when really they're just contrails. So I started that blog. And then a few years later, I kind of branched out a bit more, just because other topics kept coming up. Other things like 9/11 conspiracy theories, like even things like UFOs, and even things like ghosts, and eventually the flat Earth. And so I started Metabunk, which is a forum / blog where I post a lot of stuff, and I do investigations and collaborate with people. And that's one of the great things about the forum, is that there's lots of people who have similar interests, especially with objects in the sky. It started out with chemtrails and the contrail thing, so we're always doing things like identifying planes. So we got very good at identifying planes, figuring out what was what, and that translated over into other things like identifying UFO photos and UFO videos. And so that's the short version of where I am, how I got to be where I am now.
Now, you said you kind of set out to debunk. I just want to ask you about that. Did you intend, when you say you had an interest, let's say in UFOs, did you intend to say, I'm going to disprove these? Or did you intend to say, hey, I'm going to challenge this logically and see what happens? Like, what was your approach?
Well, no, I really do not. I don't try to address an entire subject and say, I'm going to debunk this subject. Like, you can't set out and say, I'm going to debunk UFOs. I mean, that's something that's literally impossible, because there's always going to be unidentified things in the sky, simply because not everything is close enough to be identified, and you don't always have your best camera with you. So there's always going to be instances, even if there's nothing suspicious going on. Let's say there's no aliens, there's no advanced technology, there's no interdimensional beings or anything like that. Nothing's going on. Regardless, you're going to have UFOs. You're going to have these things in the sky which fly around. So, and if there were, say, alien craft or some kind of advanced technology from another country, like flying over us, you can't debunk that in a way. You can't prove that isn't happening. All you can do is look at individual cases.
Yeah.
See, does this individual case is the simplest, most parsimonious explanation that it is some kind of advanced technology? And a lot of people conclude that these cases are, and that is the simplest case. But I look at them and I try to go into a bit more detail and try to figure out alternative explanations. Because simply saying this is unidentified technology, or this is some kind of alien visitor, is kind of it's introducing new things. It's introducing new explanations that you then have to explain those. So it's like saying, oh yes, God did it, but then who created God? So it's this whole argument, Occam's razor. What's the simplest explanation? And I think if you can find a simple explanation, it's probably going to be the one that's going to be at the top of the list in terms of what's most likely.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the other explanations are impossible. I've come up with various explanations for certain videos, and you can't prove that it's that. Yeah, I can't prove 100% this is a plane or whatever, or this is a bird, or this is a small insect. I mean, perhaps it's an alien craft that just in that thing kind of looked like a bird or a plane or whatever. So when I say I'm setting out to debunk something, really it means I'm setting out to investigate it, to figure out what it is or what it most likely is. The debunking stage of that is really the explaining that to people.
Sure.
Trying to get my explanation across to people once the investigation has been done. I don't set out to find just the boring explanation. I really want to find out what they are.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great if they were some kind of unusual craft that could actually do these 100G right angle maneuvers or whatever. That would be wonderful. That would be really, really interesting. But I think people are kind of barking at the wrong tree with that explanation.
I think that probably makes you a real popular guy in all circles when you bring up more plausible explanations. Let me ask you about that D word, the debunker. In the past, this is how I've explained it. And I talked to you a little bit too off the air, just because I didn't want to make it seem like an insult, right? And that's how I feel. And I realize like that's how you describe yourself, and it's not a bad word. So talk to me a little bit about maybe a little bit of stigma behind the word debunker, because to me that always meant that no matter what I tell you, if I say, Mick, the sky's blue, you're going to be like, no, it's red. So this is how I'm going to prove it to John and debunk him. But that's not necessarily the case, right? So I'm a little misguided there, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think the word debunk and debunker has got kind of this double-edged meaning. If I was to tell you that something has been debunked, and then I show you the explanation for something, you'd have no problem with accepting that phrasing. Something has been debunked. So that means that something has the correct explanation has been discovered for it, and an incorrect explanation has been discarded. So if someone has debunked something, and it's just been correctly debunked, that's not a problem. Everyone's fine with that. Everyone's fine that they'll say, that's been debunked. That particular video has been debunked. That's fine. Everyone likes that. But if you call yourself a debunker, someone who sets out to do that, then there is, in some people's mind, this expectation that you've already gone for the explanation that discards, the proposed explanation, the UFOs or whatever. But I kind of use the word debunker partly because of this meaning that something has been debunked is a positive thing, but also because it's an active word. It's a verb. You can use it as a verb to debunk something. You can't use skeptic as a verb. You can't skeptic something. I'm going to skeptic this video. You can use investigate, but investigate is so vague, and it's so it's an amorphous word that it doesn't really show what I'm doing. Investigate something could mean anything but debunking, I think, it really means that I'm looking at the explanation, seeing if that explanation makes sense, and then seeing if other explanations make better sense. Now, if I was to find that the best explanation for something was that it was an unknown high technology craft or whatever, or the best explanation for the buildings collapsing on 9/11 was explosives, I would tell people that. I'm not prejudiced for one explanation. My experience has shown me, though, that when claims like these are made, very, very often there is a simple explanation. And we all know that even people who are like hardcore believers in alien visitors for the UFO phenomena, they know that most of the reports of UFOs are absolutely not alien visitors. They're things like birds and planes and things. This is well known even to deep believers. So I think there's really this, you've got to figure out who has the actual responsibility for providing an explanation here. If you're making a claim that something is a alien craft, you can't just say, it fits the characteristics of an alien craft. You have to figure out, does it not fit all these other explanations? Mm-hmm. Does it not fit a plane? Does it not fit, if it's an eyewitness account, does it not fit, a temporary loss of orientation or something like that, or does it a reflection or something? If it's a video, there's lots of different reasons things can appear in videos, including things being faked and including things being photographed by mistake, like reflections in windows. So you can't just simply say, oh, I think that an alien is the best explanation, or advanced technology is the best explanation. You've really got to go through everything else. And there's also always going to be the unknown. There could be some unknown prosaic explanation. And if that's what you arrive at, that's fine. But I think a lot of people, they discard all the things they can think of, and then they go for alien technology or advanced technology.
Before we drill down specifically into a few topics that you've tackled, and UFOs is definitely going to be one, because that's one of my favorites. That's probably where you and I will differ the most in the course of the conversation. We'll align on a few things for sure with UFOs, but not everything. But before we get into the specifics, I want to ask you, in your research, again, any topic, have you ever set out to really investigate / debunk something and be pleasantly surprised that there was actually truth to it?
Yeah, people ask me this quite often, and I usually struggle to find answers. And the reason is, I think that the things where there is truth tends to be pretty boring. People make claims about perhaps some technology or something, like they'll say, oh, you can create a clear air hologram. And I say, no, you can't create clear air holograms. And then they'll show me like this one little technology that people can use to create clear air holograms. And I thought, I debunked the possibility of doing this, but there's this really kind of a crappy way you can make a clear air hologram by making sparks of plasma in the air or projecting things into smoke and things like that. So there hasn't been any really interesting ones. I haven't set out to investigate the explosive hypothesis of 9/11 and discovered it was actually true, and I haven't really looked at any good videos of UFOs and found that they can only have one particular explanation. So no, and I think it kind of speaks to the area that I look at. I look at claims in areas where mainstream science in many cases does not address these things because they think they are fairly ridiculous, and they think they're fairly ridiculous, and in a lot of the time they actually are fairly ridiculous claims. So I'm looking in areas where things are generally wrong.
You got no argument from me on that one. A lot of times those types of conspiracies that people float out there are ridiculous, and then they often try and prove themselves right by making the accusation that you can't prove them wrong. So they don't offer you the proof, but the fact that you're not taking the time to look at the explosives and bring down the building of 9/11, which I think that, and I often get a lot of heat for this with what I do, but I just don't buy into those 9/11 conspiracies at all. And I think that there are so many different factors that disprove it, and so on and so forth. We don't have to get into it, but just using that as an example, have you noticed there's kind of a psychology behind the belief in some of these conspiracy theories? I'm not saying people are crazy. I'm always fascinated by what people are so willing to accept when it comes to conspiracies and the lack of evidence. And the second part of that is how they react. Not everybody, because a lot of people out there will have intelligent conversations, but how they react to you when you say, okay, look, this person A is making this claim, but here's a logical explanation. The people that believe person A, they will come after you. And I've seen it firsthand, personally. I've seen it against you, and I've seen it against a lot of people. What is behind that? Why do people want to believe in the unprovable? I'm not saying everything is unprovable. Why do people want to believe in that?
Well, they think it's been proved. They've seen what they consider to be evidence that these things are true. People aren't setting out to believe in the unprovable. They think that they have the evidence. They've seen a lot of YouTube videos. And that might sound like I'm talking down to people, but most people who believe in conspiracy theories nowadays started out by watching some YouTube video.
Yeah.
It must be different in the UFO community, I think, because it's got a much older history. A lot of people now, if you ask them what they think their best UFO cases are, they'll cite things from the 50s and the 60s. But most conspiracy theorists now get into conspiracy theories from YouTube. They watch one video, then they watch another video. And YouTube, until quite recently, was actually trying to addict people to watching YouTube videos. And it was doing this kind of automatically. They weren't like setting out, we're going to addict people. They just want to say, how can we maximize the view time of our viewers? And so if it detected that you found a particular video interesting, it will show you more videos like that. So people end up just seeing kind of one side of the argument. If you start just watching UFO videos that are, support the hypothesis that UFOs are aliens, then you're just going to see more videos where people are presenting the same case. It's like if you were attending a trial and you only ever listened to the case for the prosecution, you didn't listen to anything that the case for the defense said. You're getting this very, very one-sided view of things. And people get sucked into a world where it seems to them like this is this huge thing that everybody knows about and everybody believes the same way that they do to a large degree. And they think that, we're on the verge of disclosure, that the government's about to reveal these things. When if you step outside that world, there's nothing like that going on. No one really cares about these things. No one really cares about, chemtrails, except for the people who have got sucked into it. Very few people really care about UFOs, except as this kind of entertaining thing. Wouldn't it be cool type thing? Science fiction. They've seen it in the movies. But people within these communities get a very, very skewed idea about how their particular topic fits into the world. They think it's a lot bigger than it actually is. So that really, I think, helps them get stuck into it. They get trapped into this set of beliefs because they don't have this outside perspective. Some of the researchers refer to it as a crippled epistemology, meaning they have a limited set of information sources and a kind of an internal way of an internal knowledge representation that's kind of structured in a weird way that it allows them to think that their view is correct. And I think they're not crazy people, like you say. They're just ordinary people who have got sucked into things in a certain way. Everybody has certain biases. Everybody has, everybody likes to feel special.
Yeah.
Everyone likes it when they feel like they figured something out that other people haven't figured out. And with just some people, they get that natural propensity to wanting to feel special or wanting to have secret knowledge or wanting to save the world just kind of gets attached to a belief.
Yeah.
Like UFO disclosure or something like that, or like 9/11 or like chemtrails or even like the flat earth. These are just ordinary people who have kind of taken a wrong turn in their knowledge system.
You've brought up UFOs a couple times, so I'll start there. I'll shift gears a little bit because I wanted to go to chemtrails just to kind of get your feedback on that.
Okay.
But sticking with UFOs, so you brought up an excellent point that some, I think you said conspiracy theorists, I would say more researchers into the field, bring up cases from the 50s and 60s as the more, and correct me if I misunderstood you, but the more believable cases that are out there. I'm going to throw out there that they're absolutely right, simply because when you go through the 50s and 60s, and granted you do have to drill down case by case, but when you go back to the 50s and 60s, you don't have the taint of the internet and people that are out there kind of more embellishing the cases and hoaxes and CGI. I mean, I've drilled down on thousands of government documents on UFOs, and yeah, I think some of them are definitely explainable. However, there are some that really do kind of make you question. With the UFO topic, and I know I'm being broad here, but with the UFO topic and Mick West as the debunker, have you ever seen anything in that particular field that made you kind of scratch your head a little bit?
Well, yes. There's lots of accounts of things happening which really aren't explainable. And a lot of the time, you think the only explanation for this is that either something really happened, or the person made it up, or the person misremembered, or the person was, kind of incorrectly saw something and thought it was something else, and then they kind of their accounts got inflated with time. So the problem with these old accounts, though, is that they're almost always just eyewitness accounts. You get talk about people in nuclear missile silos saying that nuclear missiles were deactivated and they went outside and they saw some red lights. Did that actually happen? What actually happened? When did they write that account? Nowadays, we've got recording devices. Everyone's got recording devices. And you kind of think there'd be a lot more actual recordings of things going on. I know this is an old argument. Everyone has a phone in their pocket, but I think it's a very real argument. We've got these cases from very, very long ago, and I don't really look at them that much because there's not a lot you can do with them. It's like you're looking at almost like a myth, a story from so long ago that people have often died. The chain of evidence, there really isn't very much in the way of evidence. There is just documents where people wrote down something, and we know that eyewitness testimony can go very, very wrong. I've looked at lots of more modern cases where people give a photograph and then they will say, I was outside when I took this photograph. And then you can demonstrate by looking at some of the reflections in it that they were actually inside and they're seeing a picture of a light. Now you might say people are trained professionals because they're in the military. They should know the difference between something and something else. But we know that people in the military, they also make mistakes all the time. People fly their planes into mountains by mistake because they did something wrong. Just because someone is actually a military person or a professional doesn't mean that they're going to make mistakes. And if you look over the last 100 years of human history, look at the number of people in that period. There's 5 billion people there. Sometimes somebody's going to make mistakes. And they're going to think that something was something else, and they're going to write it down. They're going to write an account of it. So I don't really hold very much stock in very, very old accounts of encounters. I would hold a lot more stock in accounts of encounters that are backed up with video.
Sure.
But it always seems to be just beyond what you can actually detect in the video.
No, and then that's absolutely fair. Most recently, and it's actually quite impressive to the lengths that you've gone to with the recent and arguably most popular videos right now that are circulating on the internet, which are the released quote unquote, this is where you and I differ, of if the government released these or not. But regardless, these 3 videos connected to the ATIP or UFO study from the government. It was quite impressive, the setup that you did. And for those who haven't seen how Mick approached this, it really is something, regardless of what your belief is, if it's alien craft or a UFO or U.S. tech, it doesn't matter. I mean, check it out. It really is a testament to the lengths that Mick goes to tackle these topics and research them and ultimately maybe even debunk them. What are your thoughts for those who haven't seen your analyses on those videos? What are your thoughts on that?
On what they actually are, you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, approach it in the sense that how do you think that they are defined? Are they these UFOs or UAPs that everybody is talking about?
Well, it's quite a complex topic, really, and there's a lot of factors involved. Like, we've got these 3 videos. We've got the one video, the FLIR video or the Nimitz video, which was actually, it kind of got leaked a long time ago, and this is the one that Commander David Fravor was supposedly in the same incident. Like, this video was taken later by a different pilot, but he says he saw this tic-tac earlier. Then you got these other 2 videos, the Go Fast video and the Gimbal video. Now, the first video, the FLIR video, is the Nimitz FLIR video. It's very low resolution. It's very blurry. You can't really tell what's going on. You can see there's kind of a blob in the distance, and it's not really moving. And you can't really get very much from that. So it's kind of difficult to look at a video by itself like that and say, is this a tic-tac shaped flying saucer? I think it's reasonably consistent with a very blurry video of a distant plane. Then the other videos, like the gimbal video, shows what looks like a saucer. It looks like a flying saucer. It's a saucer-shaped thing. And it rotates in a way that would be impossible for an actual craft if that was the craft. So my thought there is that it's not actually, what you're seeing is not actually the craft, it's actually the glare in the camera, the infrared glare. Because it's so bright, the infrared signature of the engines creates this internal glare, and the shape of the internal optics of the camera is such that it goes into this kind of saucer shape. And because the camera has to rotate to track things, just because of the actual geometry of the camera, it's forced to actually rotate when it pans from left to right, especially when going over the forward direction. It has to kind of flip over. And it's got all these internal things to kind of minimize that. But that means that the light path rotates. That means that the shape of the glare itself would rotate. And we see the glare actually rotate in more or less the same places that is suggested by the technology. If you look in the patents, it says that there's this switch over around plus or minus 3 degrees. So it's consistent with that. And I show a bunch of other videos of different glares rotating, and the things like the aura around the glare. They made a big deal of that, but that's just a common artifact of sharpening the video. It's I've demonstrated that several times.
And let me jump in real quick. That, I think, to me, was the most impressive part of that. As someone who doesn't have a background in infrared, to know that is something that's easily explainable. Why would, and this is a genuine question, I'm not trying to take a shot at the New York Times or whatever, but I mean the mainstream media, reputable organizations that profiled this, seemingly just didn't do a little bit of fact-checking of the auras, what they're calling auras around these craft. And then based off that New York Times article, you have so many people that are saying that, they just fill in the blank. It's a time warp, that it's warping this and that, that's part of either the propulsion or anti-gravity. I mean, I've seen a ton of explanations for that. And yet in like 30 seconds, you show that's actually easily explainable. Why is it that things are so misrepresented by people that we should be able to trust reporting on this?
Well, I think they're not motivated to find alternative explanations. They see it as they've got a scoop. They've got this really entertaining story, or an interesting story, or a really important story. They think it's this groundbreaking thing that they've actually discovered videos of genuine UFOs. And so, to make it more interesting to the audience, they point out all the things that they think are really interesting in the UFO. But they're not really motivated to try to figure out alternative explanations. They've already kind of made their minds up that it's not an aircraft. So they kind of say, well, everything normal is out the window. We don't even need to bother looking at that. I didn't discover the aura thing myself. I think someone else brought it up. I looked at other videos and I thought, they have this aura too. It must be just an artifact of the camera. And then someone else mentioned, they use an unsharp mask, which is just a type of filter that you use in photography to make contrast, makes the edges of things more contrasty. And if you pump it really up, you get this aura around things. You can try it yourself. If you just go into Photoshop, put a black circle on a gray background, and then use the unsharp mask filter, and then just drag it all the way up, you get this exact same white glow around the black object. And you can see it in loads and loads of different infrared videos. I have videos of people dancing and things like that, and it just shows up. So people, I don't know what they should have done it. They should have done work. There's other things as well which are similar, like the Go Fast video. This is a video. It looks like something is skimming across the surface of the ocean and moving really, really fast. And you get the pilots going, hello, and hey, I got it. Look at that thing go. They're all saying how fast it is because it looks like it's moving really, really fast. But on the screen, there's all the numbers and the angles. And you can actually work out from that where the object is in space. And it turns out it's not actually skimming the surface of the ocean. It's actually halfway between the plane and the ocean. And most of the actual apparent motion is just the parallax effect. The plane's moving one way. This object isn't moving very, very fast at all. So it looks like it's moving across the surface of the ocean because the ocean behind it looks like it's moving very fast. And yet, the people who released this, can't remember their name now, the Academy of Arts and Science.
To the Stars Academy.
Stars, yes, that's it. They got this wrong.
Yeah.
It's not just that they got it wrong. They didn't even really do any analysis. They had all the numbers there. They had the angles and they had the times and they had other things as well. They could have done it very, very easily. And the basic thing isn't very complicated at all. You can do it from one frame of the video because it's got a range and it's got the plane's altitude, and it's got a slant angle, the angle the camera is looking down at. And that's just really a simple geometry, simple high school. No, it's not even high school. It's basic level trigonometry. How high is this thing? And you work it out. It's 13,000 feet. The plane's at 26,000 feet. It's not skimming the ocean at all. Why didn't they do that math?
Yeah. Let me ask you, because I can just smell the comments coming on that section, just to kind of throw a devil's advocate question to you on that thought. The military guys, given the audio is legitimate, right? I'm not about to say that it's a hoaxed audio. However, it wouldn't surprise me if it comes out that audio was dubbed in. That's a different debate. But let's just say the audio is real. The military pilots are in there. They're really impressed. They're tracking this thing. They can't say it. They're dropping the F-bomb and so on and so forth. Where I can kind of see the comments coming is they're going to say, well, that's great, Mick. Your math is wonderful. But these are military, highly trained pilots. They're impressed by whatever these objects are. Do you get into that aspects of these stories, or do you just deal with the visuals?
No, I that question comes up all the time, and it's really a two-part question. There's one, what about the guys in the video, and then what about the guys who said that they saw something? And what's interesting is these two sets of people never overlap. You never actually get the person who took the video telling you what they saw. You get this little snippet of audio, some guy saying, it's going really fast, or whatever they say, there's a fleet of them. Check out the SA. I watch all these videos so many times now. I remember all the dialogue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's these people. They're seeing something, and in that 30 seconds, or sometimes less than that, 20 seconds, they don't know what they're looking at. We don't know if they figured out what they were looking at in the next 20 seconds. They could have immediately been, oh, that's just a bunch of birds. Oh, that's a distant jet. Let's fly over there and check it out. Oh, it shows up on the radar now. It's being tagged. It's just a KC-135 or whatever it is. They didn't know for a few seconds what it was. So just because someone doesn't know immediately what something is doesn't mean that it's unusual. Then you've got the people who supposedly saw the same things. But the thing is, the descriptions that the people who supposedly saw the same things don't really match what you see in the video. People talk about things ping-ponging back and forth, going really, really fast. And the FLIR thing, it doesn't really move.
They mentioned a fleet of them and on video. And I've heard some of those things.
Yeah, there's a fleet, but we only see the one. Then we have some other pilots saying, there's 5 of them following in a V-shaped formation behind the gimbal thing, which looked like a gyroscope. But we don't see that in the video. So we've got two things. We've got these eyewitness accounts, which we really don't know, how much we can trust those. And then we've got people talking on the video. Now, people are always saying pilots don't make mistakes. It's highly trained observers. They know exactly what they're looking at. They never get anything wrong. It's just nonsense. People get things wrong. Look at situational awareness. This is a huge problem for pilots, for trained pilots. There's a whole list of things that illusions that pilots can be subject to. There's a thing called the giant hand illusion, which happens to pilots where they feel like their plane is being pushed one way. They describe it as if like the hand of God is pushing their plane to the right, and they try to move the stick to the left, and it doesn't work. But there's nothing actually going on there. It's just kind of an illusion because their spatial perception is being messed up. There's a whole list of these. And if you look at the percentages of pilots that experience them, it's actually most of them. Most pilots at some time have some kind of illusion. Like sometimes they feel like they're flying upside down when they're actually flying the right way up. So just because someone's highly trained doesn't mean they're going to be able to identify every single thing immediately with a limited amount of information in a stressful situation.
That's a great point. Did you watch the series where these videos were obviously highlighted, unidentified, on History Channel? Did you watch it?
I watched most of it. I didn't watch the last couple of episodes, but I've seen most of it, yes.
Do you feel that they accurately tried to decipher what these videos are?
Well, no, I don't think so, because they didn't really do any real analysis of the videos. And they had some guys sat in a screening room and looking at them,
in a dark,
giving their
ominous
opinions.
room. Yes.
yeah, Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't have a smoke machine going at the same time.
Yeah, and obviously the show is trying to pump up the drama, which is fine, but it's not science. They're not analyzing things. They're trying to make an entertaining show by making the case that these are some kind of really unusual objects.
Yeah,
they're not going to be presenting. They didn't have me on to explain that it was just a rotating glare. I don't know if they even knew that these explanations existed, but because they're not really interested in alternative explanations, they're only interested in the explanations that are fun or the mystery. They don't even need an explanation; they just need a mystery. They need something that defies explanations and explain.
The reason I brought it up is, and correct me, I'm pretty sure this was in your video about the allegation that the object had kind of shot off. This one being the Nimitz video or the FLIR video, where it just kind of shoots off. And I thought that was readily debunked, wherein that it was not actually even moving at all. That was camera movement. And I thought that everybody was on the same page, even those that really think that this is UAP, UFO. Correct me, but I believe Unidentified said during that analysis that this thing just all of a sudden changes size, which I believe you showed was simply the zoom on the camera, and then it shoots off into the distance. And I believe it was you that also showed that was just camera movement. That the camera movement part was where I questioned. That was your video, right?
Yeah. Well, I think a variety of people have addressed that question. Like, obviously,
which I was surprised to see it on the TV show.
Yeah, it does. The thing is, it looks like it's zooming off. With a very superficial analysis, if you go into it and you just show it to somebody. One of the things they did on the show is they showed experts that these videos, but they didn't really prep them or anything or give them a chance to analyze it. And then they asked them what their initial impressions are. So people's initial impressions of things can be that it's shot off, or that it's moving really fast, or that it's coming towards the camera because it's changing size. So yes, that's fair enough, I suppose, that if they're just giving their initial impression. But it's kind of silly to do that when there's already been this fairly extensive analysis, and it has been shown that the object really isn't moving relative to anything other than the camera.
Yeah.
And that these movements all coincide with changes in the zoom or rotations. We get the same kind of rotating camera effect in the FLIR video as you do in the gimbal video. It's a lot kind of more dramatic. I don't think it's the exact same camera, but you have the same problem when it crosses over the forward-facing axis. The camera has to rotate to adjust, and you see that in the FLIR video. And people mistake that as the craft doing some kind of weird loop-de-loop or something like that. Yeah, because that's what it's looked like if you don't know what you're seeing.
You had a great setup for that. That was quite impressive. I'm going to tell you again. You and I won't see eye to eye on every topic, but I mean that was impressive, and I believe that's how I reached out to you on that point. Was I think we had a back and forth on Twitter, a respectful disagreement, but then I wrote you privately and saw those videos, and I said, you know what? Disagreement aside, it is impressive, and I would recommend those listening again challenge your own beliefs, look at Mick's interpretation, and see what you think. Because one of the things that I really respect about you is at the end of one of the videos, I believe it was the gimbal, but at the end of one of them, you said this isn't an exact match, but it's close, and it's something we should consider. And that one line for me really stuck out, that you're open to different explanations, and you're not here to say, you know what, that was an F-15 and that's it. You don't close the book. That you really do put logical explanations out there, and when you're not sure, you say it, and that to me is something that I respect. One of the other things that I've kind of picked up on is that you literally go out there and talk to people. And I believe that I saw a while ago you went to a Flat Earth Society conference. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was.
How was that? What is that about?
It was fascinating. The Flat Earth people, they're very nice. They're very polite people. Yeah. What happened there was they were holding a conference. It was this guy called Mad Mike Hughes. And he's the guy who built his own rocket to try to fly up to space and see if the Earth is flat or not. And he built his first version was just it was a steam powered rocket, and it only got to 1,300 feet or something like that. But he's planning to go to 85 miles up which is this ridiculous thing. But he had a conference, I think, because he wasn't invited to another flat Earth conference. He decided to do his own conference, and the organizers needed somebody to, get people in, and they wanted to get someone to debate one of the flat earthers. So they asked if I would come along and do a debate. So I agreed to that, and had a very interesting time.
What was you like? What that to me is one of the most mind-boggling things. One of the most mind-boggling topics, I should say, that people are still stuck on this. But you say they're nice people, and I'm not going to say that they're not. But how do they believe in it? Like, what is put forth on their side? Because I am fascinated by that.
Well, it basically, to believe in the flat Earth, you have to reject all of science. They come from a position where nothing is proven to be true unless they personally can verify it. And because for them, the Earth looks like it's flat, they start out with the kind of default belief that it's flat. And also because the government is telling them that it's round, and they generally don't trust the government because they think the government is evil. They think it's actually more likely that the government will be lying about it than the government is telling them the truth. So that, gives them more incentive to believe that the Earth is flat. They also then go out and do various experiments. They will make observations of things, like they will stand at one side of the lake and have someone stand on the other side of the lake. The lake is, say, like 8 miles across, and then they shine a flashlight or a laser across the lake. It shouldn't be visible geometrically because of the curve of the surface of the water, and yet they can see it across the lake. So they're convinced then that they've proven that the surface of the lake is flat, and therefore the Earth is flat. And the problem is they don't really understand the science, and they're not particularly motivated to try to disprove themselves. They're only motivated to try to prove a particular thing. So they see something like these observations of a laser across a lake, and they say, oh, that proves it. The Earth is flat. If you do explain to them that's because of refraction, because of the light curving, because water is a very big source of heat. So it absorbs heat during the day, or it stays cold during the day. So you get this cold layer and it bends the heat around. If you explain that to people, they're not really interested. It's not even they're not really interested. Often they're not capable of understanding it, because it's actually quite complicated. Most people aren't capable of understanding things like why you can see a laser across the lake. So they get stuck in it in a similar way to some of the other conspiracy theorists, like the 9/11 people. They have this set of beliefs. They think it's important, and they're not incentivized to look at other explanations. So they get stuck.
Some of them are damaging. Like, conspiracy theories are damaging. Do you feel the same way? Like, do you have any that you get emotionally invested in? The 9/11 one is one for me. I get emotionally invested in that one. Flat Earth, I find that fascinating, and respectfully fascinating, UFOs, that's something that's high on my list as something that I feel there is something to. But do you get emotionally involved in any of this?
Yeah, well, the ones I get more emotional about are the fake shooting ones, where they say a shooting was fake. And especially the ones where children were killed. The people who think that Sandy Hook was faked, and that nobody actually died there, and they go to the town of Sandy Hook and they harass the parents of children who have died, just because they believe in some ridiculous conspiracy theory about how the government is trying to take away our guns by staging these school shootings. I get kind of upset about that. And at first I didn't even want to address them because it was such a horrible conspiracy theory. But then if a lot of people are starting to believe in things like that, these false flag accusations, like they say the Boston Marathon bombing was a false flag. But my father-in-law was in the Boston Marathon, running the Boston Marathon when that bomb went off. He was 5 minutes behind the finish line when that bomb went off. If the bomb had gone off like 5 minutes later, he could have been caught in the explosion.
Wow.
People really do die in these things. People are hurt, and then people get hurt later because these conspiracy theorists start harassing them and calling them liars and putting up web pages saying they're just actors. It's kind of a horrible thing.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of that one, but I'm glad you brought it up, because those, again, can be very, very damaging, in trying to take those conspiracy theories and make them real. And you do have those YouTube videos that again gain traction. And if you do go out and try and debunk the theory, those get 1/100th of the views and no one cares. It's the crazy talk that people make these YouTube videos out of. And yeah, it is very damaging. I asked the chat room, Mick, just for some questions. I want to ask you about contrails, but one that came in was about Bob Lazar. And I actually, this isn't connected to the question, but I actually saw that you had posted about the Identimat. That is the hand scanner that in the film, if you saw with Bob Lazar, and that's directed to the chat room and listeners, that if you saw the film, that was what Jeremy Corbell had shown Bob Lazar, and then he flips out and he says, "Oh yeah, that's the one," which I kind of scratched my head a little bit, but you showed something pretty fascinating about it. Tell me what you posted about the Identimat, but also have you dealt with any of the other claims of Bob Lazar? That comes from Jesse Randolph, I believe.
Yeah, well, the Identimat thing was that someone earlier this year had discovered that it actually appears in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the film, which was released in 1977. And there's a very clear shot of it where the guy comes up to it and he puts his hand on it and it scans it and he takes his card out of it. Which sounds very much like Lazar's explanation. And it's the same machine. There's only this one. Well, there's two versions of it, but it's the Identimat 2000. It was in this video from this actual film, and I retweeted it. Well, I tweeted it out because it didn't seem to be getting very much traction. I think the video only had like 600 views or something at the time. So I thought that more people should know about this, because people continue to say things like Bob Lazar was correct because he made all these predictions, or he gave all this information that later turned out to be true. He told them about this security device. Well, it's quite possible he actually saw this device in use, because it wasn't this like super secret thing. It was something that got used in school cafeterias in a couple of places, because it didn't work very well, so it didn't last very long.
Yeah, I heard about the school cafeteria, which is kind of humorous.
Yeah, and it was used in military installations as well, and we know that he did some work in various places like that. He worked for a contractor, and he went to these places. It's entirely possible that he saw it being used from the non-secure side. He might have even had to go through it at some point. But the thing about the presentation in Jeremy Corbell's film is that they make this huge deal about it, this huge drama like this. Everyone was describing as science fiction, that it couldn't possibly work, and then it was eventually verified that these things existed. But the people had known they existed for many years before. They were invented around 1970. I think there's newspaper articles about it from 1971. Then there's the 1977 appearance in Close Encounters, and there's lots of other articles about them. They weren't something that was this secret technology that only he could possibly that verified he worked there. And there's other things like the element 115.
Yeah,
like saying that he predicted element 115 was something. He's saying that's what was used to power the anti-gravity machines, or the gravity machines. But element 115 was just one of several elements that were yet to be discovered. The entire history of the discovery of elements has been this just constant upward trajectory, where we get elements with one more proton than the element before is the next element in the chart. And I think at the time we got up to something like 110. So it was perfectly natural to expect that in the future we would have elements that would be discovered. And what was discovered was just something with a very, very short half-life. It has a half-life, I think, of like a quarter of a second or something like that, which means that it basically will disappear in a puff of smoke if you actually had any. And yet then we have Bob Lazar at some point saying he took a pound of it away from their stock of hundreds of pounds of it that they have there, which is it's literally impossible. So he's really saying that there's some kind of stable version of element 115, which hasn't been discovered, so that hasn't been verified. All that's happened is that we've been able to synthesize, very briefly, element 115, which is something that we kind of expect to happen anyway. We expect to be able to synthesize these elements further down the periodic table. That wasn't surprising at all.
So the science doesn't match up. His claims don't match up. So
Yeah.
I'm shocked. You don't believe the story of Bob Lazar, huh?
No, I think his story, I think he's either entirely making it up or it is come over time to believe that it's true.
Yeah.
People put things out as evidence that are actually the complete opposite of evidence. They put out the fact that his record, his academic record is missing as evidence that there's some kind of big cover up. And yet that's actually just evidence that he's lying about his academic record.
Yeah.
He didn't go to Harvard, and the reason there's no record of him going to Harvard is because he never went there. So you can't say, oh, there's evidence is missing, therefore there's a cover-up, therefore that is evidence. No, The evidence is missing. That means that's evidence that that thing didn't happen.
When that kind of stuff comes up, I call it the I want to believe syndrome. I've talked about it on this show a couple times. You just sacrifice all logic in exchange for believing in something, and that's where I find some of this stuff a little bit silly. And the erasing of his identity is definitely fitting of that. Here's a great question. Going back to the UFO topic from the chat room, this one is about the 1976 Iran incident. Robert Farmer. Have you ever looked into the 1976 Iran UFO incident? That's what got me fascinated by this 23 years ago.
I don't remember it.
Okay, this was the one in Tehran. It's a 4-page government document. No visuals. I know you said that you prefer those. But this is where craft was seen engaged by 2 different F-4 Phantom jets, seemingly strategically shut them down. Communications were shut down. Not ringing a bell?
No, I'm afraid not.
That's okay.
I'm not really a UFO guy.
I knew you weren't, but it came in on the chat room and thought I'd ask you. I'd be curious to your thoughts. If you don't mind, I'll send you a link to the document.
Sure.
It's a real document. It's what got me personally involved now almost 23 years ago. So great question. So I'll definitely make sure you get that just for, again, there's nothing to analyze other than the story, and be curious what your reaction is. That being said, I'm sure there's a couple more questions. Feel free to put them all in caps if you're listening live. A couple about believing in the ET presence. Quite a few people have asked that. I'll ask you real quick. I think I know what the answer is, but is ET... We'll formulate it 2 different ways, combining everybody's question. Are ETs out there, or extraterrestrials out there in the universe? Do you believe that? And then the second part of it, do you believe that they're here?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So I think almost certainly the universe is huge. It's enormously large. Probably there are some ETs of some sort in this galaxy, and in the entire universe, I think it's pretty much inevitable that there is, or at least there was, aliens somewhere. It could be that it's very, very sparse. We don't really have any evidence of aliens in the galaxy. And I think, if there were lots of them, you would see some kind of evidence. But if we look around in our immediate vicinity, what we can see, we don't really see very much. But there's a lot more of the universe that we can't see, and we know that it's very, very large, and there's lots of stars and lots of planets. Are they here? I haven't seen any good evidence. Mm-hmm. If they were here, what are they doing? What are they doing here? Why are they here? It doesn't make any sense. If there's aliens somewhere in the galaxy out there that come here to secretly, spy on us and steal our cows, I don't see any good evidence of it actually being real. You see lots of unidentified flying saucers, unidentified flying craft of various types. I don't see any good evidence of those sightings. The simplest explanation for that is that we have alien visitors. You see accounts of things like people are being abducted by aliens. You see accounts of encounters with aliens. People will see they've actually talked to aliens. But then people will also say they've talked to fairies, or they've talked to little dwarfs, or they've talked to angels, or they've talked to demons, or they've talked to beings from other galaxies via psychic means. Just because people are saying that something happened doesn't mean it actually happened.
Yeah,
I think most ghost stories, for example, can be explained by sleep paralysis. The ones that happen in someone's bedroom where a specter appears can be explained by sleep paralysis. The sleep paralysis is something I've had myself. I've had situations where I've woken up and I've seen giant spiders coming towards me in my room, and I could quite easily imagine somebody having that same experience, but having an alien coming towards them. So there's these explanations for all these things. And I don't think we need to go the next stretch and say, oh, well, there must be aliens because we have all these things happening. All these things would happen if there weren't aliens.
Yeah.
So why do we need the alien explanation?
I think that, well, I have to have you back simply because we're starting to run out of time. I'd love to have that conversation with you because I think that there's multiple facets of the UFO/alien topic. Multiple facets in the sense that there's extraordinary claims where you and I are going to see eye to eye, and I would absolutely agree with you about some of the sensational claims. And that's what's difficult about the topic for me as somebody who is an advocate for further study, that the water gets mucked up by the media misrepresenting auras on an IR video or, whatever it may be, fill in the blank. And so then all of a sudden you have a shift of people that believe that sensational stuff. So when you try and be logical, you're just a skeptic. And that's what I've seen personally when I'll write about something that has come out either through Freedom of Information Act or just using common sense. I will write something and see that nobody cares about that. It just becomes this vicious conversation. So again, you have these multiple ways to address that topic. So I want to bring you back if you're open to it and just kind of discuss respectfully about it, because I think that there's a lot of supporting evidence, but sadly you never really see it or hear it simply because of that sensationalism in the media, in print journalism and on television, like Unidentified, that really did not do their due diligence. To close that thought, I was a television producer on a show called UFO Hunters. I did not produce all of them. Please know that. I was only on season 3, and I only did 1 or 2. I did 2 episodes on season 3. That being said, my episodes, I would focus on the science and really try and bring that into it. And it really does hurt the credibility of the topic because, again, those out there that are skeptical or aim to ultimately debunk something don't get to see the real stuff, which I think is a shame. So rant over, so I apologize for that, but I just wanted to at least say I'd love to have that conversation with you because I do think that there's a lot out there. The 76 Iran incident document is high on the list of something that I'd love to shoot over to you just to get some feedback. Again, nothing to analyze other than these are real incidents that happen, that are documented, that don't have the taint of the internet or some public benefit corporation trying to raise money. So, just more genuine research. I have a couple more minutes with you, I hope. I'd love to just kind of get a quick synopsis of your research into chemtrails. It's something I've wanted to talk to you about the whole hour, and we've just had a great conversation about everything else. I know you've done a lot of work on it. It's something that is incredibly popular, especially on the internet. Some of the forums on Facebook, last I checked a year or so ago, had like 100,000 plus people into that topic. So it's something really important. So in the last couple minutes, can I ask you to just kind of dissect, like real quickly, what is the theory out there and what is, in your opinion, the interpretation of it all?
Well, the theory is that the trails that people are seeing behind planes is some kind of secret spraying program. And the most common reason for that given is that it's some kind of climate modification, like they're trying to change the weather, to change the climate, either to cover up global warming or perhaps to make it worse. It's not entirely clear. Depends who you talk to. But these things are based on a number of very simple misconceptions. People have this misconception that a contrail immediately should dissipate when a plane flies by. Like you see these short trails behind planes sometimes, and then you see long trails, and they say the long trails are chemtrails, but they just haven't. They just don't know. They're missing the information that contrails are clouds, and so they can do exactly the same thing that any other cloud can do. They can persist just the same as a cloud can persist. So seeing a contrail last a long time doesn't mean that it's anything special. It just means that the weather where that contrail is supports clouds lasting a long time and spreading out. And this is something that's been observed for a very long time. A lot of people don't realize that contrails were observed back in the 1940s in the Second World War over Germany. They would see these huge nets of contrails crisscrossing the sky because of all the bomber bombs going towards Germany. And they were seen in the 50s and 60s and the 70s. And as jet traffic took off, became more and more common. And there are actually historical documents and just photographs and books and things like showing these things. contrails persisting going back a long time. So it's not, people don't have to rely on things like me. They can go and check it out for themselves. And this is something I always encourage people in the UFO stuff as well. I'm not saying I think it's this and you should trust me because I'm an expert. I'm saying, here's my analysis. You can do the exact same analysis. I'll do different analysis, but this is what I'm looking at. And this is the math I did, and these are the references I use. And you can check to see if it's right or not. And I think that's a better way of looking at it rather than trying to tell someone what you think. You tell them how to figure out for themselves what it actually is. And I do this with contrails by looking at, giving them books that they can look at where it shows these old contrails. I do it with UFOs by showing them the math, showing them the actual analysis that I did. So if you show people how to figure things out for themselves, it's a lot better than telling them what you think something is.
Let me ask you if you could just flatter me with one more question, and I'll let you go on that note, because I admittedly don't have an expertise or a big background in chemtrails. But what I do find intriguing is that at least it plays into a documented history of the U.S. government that is documented. Again, these aren't conspiracy theories, where they had programs doing tests, spraying something in the air to ultimately see how it would spread out, what they would do, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that they're still doing this today, but it was interesting you did bring up, 40s, 50s, and 60s back when some of these programs were underway. It does fit into that, though, right? I mean, there is a documented history. Ultimately, don't we have to get up there and get a sample just to kind of make sure?
Well, people have gone up there and got samples. There's a German atmospheric research organization that go up all the time, and they're sampling contrails. The thing is, if you go up there, you're just sampling one thing. Who knows whether it's the secret spraying program or the real thing? It's not going to prove anything either way. Well, you would prove something if you found something, but you're not going to. But yeah, you brought up like these spraying programs in the past. These were tests done in the Cold War. They wanted to see how far chemical weapons and biological weapons would spread. So they spread what they thought was a harmless bacteria in various locations, and they spread a thing called zinc cadmium sulfate, this chemical that you can detect by fluorescing it under UV light, just to see how far things would spread. They didn't actually test biological or chemical weapons in anybody. They were just using analogs of those things to see how far they were spread through the air. And I don't think that really does map to the chemtrail theory. It does perhaps if you think that chemtrails are some kind of poisoning, like they're spraying poison out all the time, but that's kind of very much a fringe theory in the chemtrail community. Most people in the chemtrail community think that it's actually some kind of secret geoengineering, that they think they're actually trying to alter the weather with stuff that's relatively non-toxic, like aluminum oxide or sulfur and stuff like that. So I don't think these old things really map onto the new things. And they were very limited as well. They did something where they put some bacteria in the New York subway system to see how far it was spread. They thought it was perfectly harmless bacteria. I think it might have given a couple of people pneumonia on average. But at the time, they didn't think anything of it. They just thought that they were putting this stuff in to see how far it would go, and then they would do tests to see where it ended up. It's not really the same thing as actual geoengineering or even some kind of massive poisoning program.
So you find, and that was a question in the chat room, so just a bottom line, you find no evidence of any geoengineering?
No, in fact, I spoke to one of the lead geoengineering researchers a couple of weeks ago on my podcast, David Keith, and I asked him quite extensively, like, what's the state of geoengineering research, what has been done? And he couldn't think of any example where anything had ever been sprayed out of a plane in terms of geoengineering research, let alone any operational program. He said, flat out, there's no operational spraying program for geoengineering research. And his lab is doing some research coming up maybe later this year, maybe next year, where they're going to spray a bit of material from a tethered balloon, I think, but they're going to spray about 3 pounds of material. And that's it. And it's harmless stuff, basically, like aluminum oxide or something, or even just water. I think they're going to start out with water. And that's the state of geoengineering right now. That's as far as the science goes. And no one anywhere in the entire world has done anything more than that, or even suggested doing anything more than that in the near future.
Well, I really do appreciate your time today, Mick. It's been a great conversation, respectful, and I appreciate your points and allowing me to do some counterpoints. I do appreciate it. So thank you so much for taking the time with everybody today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been very interesting. I just want one final thing. I want
Sure.
to tell people, don't be so hard on debunkers. Like, if you really want to try to get to the bottom of something, then you should really kind of embrace what the debunkers are doing, in that we're clearing away a lot of the cruft, a lot of the stuff that's getting in the way of looking at what's really there. Now, you talked about all these bad examples of UFOs which clutter things up. If debunkers can help by clearing away the bad examples, then all that will remain will be the good examples, the ones that we can't explain, and you'll be able to focus on that and be able to make a much better case. So use the debunkers.
I appreciate that thought, and it's something I agree 100%. That's why I asked you to come on here, because I always like to challenge what I believe, but also reinforce some of the doubts that I might have too, or challenge those as well. I'm always open to learn something, and hey, if I'm wrong, especially with the D word and using debunker, then I love being told that. So I do appreciate your time, Mick. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you all for listening. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.